General James Jones is a retired U.S. Marine four-star general. He served as National Security Advisor to President Barack Obama. He is eminently qualified to discuss U.S.-Iranian relations.
General, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
As a decorated U.S. military veteran, a former commander, former National Security Advisor, how did you first learn of the MEK?
Well, truthfully, while I was in office as National Security Advisor, it never came to my attention. Not one time that I recall. And it wasn't until after I left the White House in 2010 that I was invited to speak to a group in Washington on the subject of national policy towards Iran. And since I was reasonably current, and I saw who the panelists were, a very distinguished group of people from all walks of life, I thought, why not? And so I did that. But I still, when I went into that meeting, I still really did not know the details of the MEK or the history of it, because it never came to my attention. But shortly after that, of course, I was pretty well informed by a lot of the panelists who were sitting on that particular day, and that's how I got interested in this organization and this quest.
Washington, of course, is filled with opinions on every topic, but there are some, particularly in current day, that are not particularly fond. Some in Washington that are not particularly fond of the MEK.
Right.
The Iranian policy seems muddled from administration to administration.
Yeah, for sure.
Why do you support the MEK in their efforts?
Well, the thing that really converted me, if you will, from kind of a passive interest to an active interest was a phone call I got in the middle of the night in New York in 2011, I think it was, when the Iraqi army in uniform attacked Camp Ashraf, which was the home of the MEK at the time, and the person that called me was actually there on a cell phone, and I could hear gunfire in the background. And what was particularly troubling to me was that I knew that the American army had, when they invaded Iraq in 2003, discovered Camp Ashraf and went there to find out who these people were and everything else. And in returning for disarming them, granted every one of them a kind of a safe conduct ID card, and put a full colonel, you just met one just a few minutes ago, in charge of the liaison with Camp Ashraf. And while we were present in Iraq, we worked very closely with the MEK and the people at Camp Ashraf and derived a lot of intelligence about what was really going on in Iran, particularly on the nuclear program. They were extremely well informed, and we had a great relationship. And when the decision was made by President Obama to withdraw from Iraq, the responsibility was transferred to the Maliki government, which was shameful in the way it treated the people of Camp Ashraf and cooperated with the Iranian government to persecute these people. And that attack that I heard, and of which I have a video taped to this day, and it occurred when our Secretary of Defense, Bob Gates, was actually visiting Iraq, which was adding insult to injury. But the fact that innocent people were being shot at by Iraqi soldiers in, frankly, U.S. uniforms that we gave them, I'm sure, for their army, using American weapons that we provided and Humvees that we provided and everything else, what I thought was just outrageous. From my hotel in New York, I called Admiral Mullen, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the time, and said, "Hey, you know what's going on at Camp Ashraf?" And he had not heard. And so I told him briefly what I was hearing on my telephone, and then I called Jim Mattis, who was the Marine commander, CENTCOM at the time, and he did not know. And so I informed him, and then of course I'm out of office, so I called the White House and left a message for my successor, and I can't say that anybody really got back to me and did anything about it.
You mentioned the Obama administration, and traditionally in American history, foreign policy has been fairly consistent. Whether Republican, Democrat, president after president maintains who friends are, who the enemy list may be. But for the last four presidents, we've kind of seen zigging and zagging, from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden. How difficult does that make the job of the military? How difficult does that make the job for the diplomats when the policies, in the opinion of people elsewhere, when those policies you're putting forth may change again in 4 years?
One of the big problems we have internationally is exactly that point. Our friends and allies and our enemies and allies, or non-allies, I should say, are confused by American foreign policy because it can change on a dime. It can change on an election. And we used to be very predictable, and we used to be very clear. And where Iran is concerned in particular, but also a lot of other countries, but Iran, since we're talking about MEK, our Iranian policy has been unclear and vacillating between appeasement and, threatening to be a harder line, but never really coming through with any definitive action that would cause the behavior change that we hope to see in Iran. So I think there used to be a time in our country where not only the executive branch, but the legislative branch, between Democrats and Republicans, on national security issues, maybe there was a 10% difference, but not much more than that. They generally tend to agree on the big issues. But for the last several administrations, we've seen a much wider swing in terms of how we express ourselves, in terms of our values and our commitment.
In Iran, the movement for change is led by Miriam Rajavi. Tell me what you know about her.
Well, I know that she's elected. I've known her now for the better part of a decade, if not more, and I admire her because of the 10 points that she has articulated as her vision for the future of Iran, which is you have to say this if you read the 10 points, is Jeffersonian democracy. And I think we should all be for anyone who in this day and age supports a truly democratic regime and is anchored on those 10 very Jeffersonian points.
Why should the world take the NCRI and MEK seriously? Why them and why not any other particular group?
Well, the NCRI embodies a number of groups, as you know, but to me, one of the reasons we need to pay attention to them, aside from the fact that I think they embrace the values, the democratic values for the future of Iran, but I think we should pay attention to them because Iran pays attention to them, and they pay mortal attention to them. Through Camp Ashraf 1, Camp Ashraf 2, formerly known as Camp Liberty, and now the persecution continues a little bit in Albania because of Iran's relentless attack and determination to do everything they can to eradicate MEK, NCRI from the face of the earth if they can do it. And I think we have not, we, the United States, we've been divided by these different opinions that are just that. The people are entitled to their own opinions, but not to their own facts. And if you look at the history articulated by people like Ambassador Link Bloomfield, who is, in my view, the scholar on this history, whereas I think most of the others are that are counter to what I think we should be doing, but that feel that the MEK has a sordid past, and as a lot of people say, American blood on their hands and everything else during the Shah's time. To me, the facts don't, number one, illustrate that. Number two is that was a long time ago, and you really need to study what the MEK NCRI organization stands for and is doing, which I think is aligned with our best interests where our Iranian policy is concerned.
We talked just a little bit about politics and political parties playing politics with foreign policy. What do you think of the current policy, the current administration's policy toward Iran?
I think I think it borders too much on appeasement. I think there has been a mistaken belief that there is a possibility that Iran is going to somehow see the light and stop what they're doing with regard to the quest for nuclear weapons capability. I think the evidence has proven that that's incorrect, that Iran is not going to change. They've never lived up to anything they said they were going to do. And as a consequence, in different parts of the world, they watch what we say and watch what we do, and the two don't measure up. And so as a result, you have boatloads, I should say plane loads of American dollars being delivered to the Iranian government in the hope that they'll somehow wake up the next morning and be, basically say, we see the light now. They don't see the light. They only see the light as a nuclear light, and they're going to press for that, and they're going to continue to support the Houthis, the Hezbollah, the Hamases of the world, because that's who they are and that's what they do. And as a result, some of their former friends and allies and current friends and allies, notably in the Arab world, are visibly shocked when they see our behavior not consistent with what they think should be done. And on the other hand, there is positive movement in terms of the Arab world, I will say Saudi Arabia in particular, towards an American-Saudi rapprochement that would be good. I mean, it would be good for us. It would be good for the Arabs. And I think we need to reestablish our values and our commitments to our friends and allies around the world as to exactly what it is we are standing for. And unfortunately, today there was confusion about that.
What should those policies be? What should we, when we put a statement out as the United States of America that says, here's what we stand for, what should we stand for?
Well, I think we should stand for not rewarding bad behavior, number one. Number two is the first time they fire at a U.S. ship or they fire a rocket at the ship belonging to our friends and allies is the next day the Iranian Navy should be looking at the world from the bottom up.
Fair enough. The Iranian president was killed in an accident recently. Is that an opportunity for the United States? And if so, are we missing that opportunity?
I don't think there's an opportunity in Iran. I mean, I think the 6 candidates that might replace President Raisi are all hardliners. So there's one I think I saw in the newspaper that might be a reformer, but that's tokenism. There's no reform going on, and the Iranian people, I believe, will in the not too distant future, with organizations like NCRI, led by a woman, will eventually take matters into their own hands and and reassert themselves for the future of a great country with a great history. But it's going to have to come from within, and we should not do anything that would tend to diminish our enthusiasm for that to happen.
General, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tim.